Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.
Listen, I know times are tough, and there's a lot of fear out there. But I also know America will come back strong if we've got the right leadership. We can get kids back in school, folks back to work, back to their lives safely if we do it together. So thanks for listening. I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Biden for president.
All right. Well, everyone, welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur. As always, this is Matt here, and I have a very special guest this week, someone who has been on before. I've got Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast, a podcast that is the Dolph Lundgren centered, but of course, what we're going to be talking about today is going to be something a little different than Dolph's host. But welcome back, Sean. Welcome back on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I know that when you invited me on and we discussed Don't Kill It, that was a fun conversation. And then you were gracious enough to join my show a few months back, and we discussed The Final Inquiry, which was the film was pretty terrible, but it was still a fun conversation all the same. So.
Yes, and I have a feeling we're going to be doing the same thing with this episode. But one thing I wanted to touch on about your podcast that I love is that, just like when I was on, you have great conversations about Dolph Lundgren movies, but also I love that you have people on who work in the industry that have worked on Dolph Lundgren films, whether it's co-stars, producers, directors. It's one of the things that I think is really cool. Kind of gives us a more well-rounded understanding of how the film industry works.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's been it's been one of the things. I mean, look, I've always been a huge fan of film in general, but especially of the action genre. Mainly of these direct-to-video action movies. And so, you watch a lot of these films, and like for example, the film that we're going to be discussing today, Against the Dark. You watch it, and yeah, I mean, let's be honest, it's not a great film, and I think we're going to be dumping on it quite a bit. But you look at it, and it is marketed, and it is sold, and it probably got most of its financing because it is a Steven Seagal movie. But in the end, he is such a small piece of the entire puzzle, of the entire thing that is on display here. And I wouldn't be surprised if he actually, for being the quote unquote lead, even though I put that into question,
Right.
he is. I wouldn't be surprised if actually he was the one who was on set the least. You know what I mean? And so by doing a lot of these interviews and getting to speak with a lot of the people behind the scenes, you get to realize, okay, even if it is a small little low budget film, like for example this one is, there are still hundreds upon hundreds of people who are working behind the scenes who may not get the credit that I don't think they deserve. I mean, you have the camera operators, you have the people working the lightings, you have the people working doing sound design, and I mean even the people doing catering and whatnot. You know what I mean? And so it's really interesting because this particular film, yeah, we're going to be talking about its shortcomings, and there are quite a few shortcomings, but it's always, especially after getting to speak with a lot of the people, you kind of think about it, and it's like, wow, it's almost in a weird way, it's kind of unfair to dump on this, considering that, so many people were working on it, trying to make it look good, and then, in the end, we see what the end result is. Having said that, I think it's also fair to say that, look, we gotta we gotta review a film, and we gotta call it how it is. And if the film is just not good, it's not good. But there's quite a few reasons why. And I'll just get to it right now. I think the main reason why this film is not good is because of its main star. But there's tons of people working behind the scenes, and that's been I've been very fortunate and been very blessed to gotten to speak with as many people as I have in the show, and we're still going, which is great.
Yeah, and I mean, one of your more recent episodes, you talked to the producer of this film, not about this film. You were talking more about, because he'd produced some of Dolph's films, Benjamin Sachs. But one of the things that really struck me about what he talked about with the industry, with someone like a Seagal being in this movie that we're going to talk about, is that for the studio, the movie is worth a certain amount of money if there's a name involved, whether it's Seagal or Bruce Willis or somebody like that. And it's almost like if there isn't that Seagal name there on the tin for the studio to sell it, they're going to give the someone like Benjamin Sachs less money to make the film because it's not worth as much to them. And so, like you talked about, all of those other people that are involved who need to get paid, as well, and who are putting in a lot more work than Seagal is. It's like, what did he say, Benjamin Sachs? I think he said it's like they work like 14-hour days to get these films done in the short period they do. So you're right about that. It's like, we think of it as a bait and switch, right? We're like, oh, I'm coming into this movie I want to see Seagal fight vampires. And so we think of it as a bait and switch when in fact, Seagal is paying to keep a lot of people in business just by being in that movie.
It really is. It really is unfortunate. I mean, it's almost, especially from the fans' standpoint, or like I said, the people working behind the scenes, putting in those 14-hour days. Yeah, it's really unfortunate because and I go back and forth on this, of course, because let's face it, I don't think I would have seen this film. I don't think it would have been on my radar, and I really wouldn't even know about it had it not been for Steven Seagal's involvement. But having said that, it's really telling, and it's really, like I said, unfortunate. I think I'm going to keep going back to that. The fact that I'd be surprised if Seagal spent more than 2 to 3 days on set on this film. Yet in the end, he's the one who gets top billing. He's the one whose face is poorly photoshopped onto the DVD cover. He's the one who is, all over the trailer and everything. His name is above the title and everything. And I mean, it's funny too, because watching it, I don't know if you picked up on this either or not, but when you watch it, it's a Steven Seagal film, and we can put that in quotes, but there's really no reason for Seagal's character to be in this film. I mean, you could take out his character out of the entire puzzle of that this movie is, and I almost think the movie would be maybe even a little more coherent, but I have a feeling that Seagal was thrown in, and I have a great analogy that I was going to throw out here later on, but I have a feeling that the producers and the financiers and everything like that had this script when it was going in production. They pretty much said, hey, we have Seagal, and he is available for about 3 days. Can we fit him in some kind of way? And suddenly the writer and everybody working on the film is like kind of thinking like, oh shit, let's scramble and let's kind of make do here.
Right. I mean, one of the things that Benjamin Sachs talks about when he was on your show was how Seagal started coming to him, or coming to his production company, saying, I need another movie. And it was almost like a law of diminishing returns there, where the studios were like, there's 3 Seagal movies in the same year. He's not worth as much now to us. And if you look at his IMDb, around the period of this, kind of, I guess if you go a little bit later than this film, I think like you get into like the 2016 area, he's doing like 3 or 4 movies a year. I guess around this time he was actually doing a lot too. And so it's that's part of it too, right? Is it like, Seagal's like, I could use some extra money, so let's get another one of these DTV flicks out there. And it's almost like the studio's like, well, we already have 2 Seagal movies that we're trying to push. We can only fit so much space on the red box screen and whatnot to, for Seagal stuff. And, if Dolph's doing 5 movies and Scott Adkins is doing 5 movies, it's like, suddenly the market just gets filled.
Well, and that's one. To be perfectly honest, that's one of the things that. Well, there were a few things. I mean, I was a Seagal fanatic throughout, his golden era, throughout the '90s and the early 2000s and everything. And that's one of the things that kind of got me burnt out on the guy, was that he was putting out what seemed like 6 movies a year, to where suddenly he's competing against himself on the video store on the video store shelves. And it's interesting because, okay, if you look at guys like Dolph Lundgren, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Wesley Snipes, they had on average about 1 movie a year, which I think is a pretty good rate, because what that does is that keeps the fans happy, that keeps the fans satisfied. Okay, if their action star is doing 1 movie a year, even if you remember like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, back when their movies were going to the theaters, there was always the new Schwarzenegger movie each year, or the new Stallone movie, and maybe they had like a gap year between or so. But I think 1 movie a year is pretty par for the course, and that's pretty good. I mean, if you think about it, look at what George Lucas did, with the Star Wars movies. I think one of the things that he did that, to be perfectly honest, I think one of the things that he did, and why Disney is the Star Wars franchise is kind of floundering with them, is George Lucas had it right. He had a new Star Wars movie that was released every 3 years. And what that did is that kept the fans, happy, that kept the fans, wanting more, that kept the anticipation going. And then if you look at what Disney's doing, well, what is Disney doing? They're saturating the market, and they're releasing 1, sometimes 2 Star Wars, movies, shows, whatever, a year. Well, as a result, you have the fans, even the most diehard fans, they're getting burned out. And they're saying, like, look, more necessarily isn't better here. And I think that's exactly what Seagal was doing. He was, I mean, there's also, I think there's just something so humorous about picturing Seagal knocking on Ben Sax's door and saying, "Hey, I need some work. What script do you have for me?" You know what I mean? So, but yeah, like I said, more definitely isn't better. And I think that's one of the, I mean, there's quite a few things why Seagal has become the joke that he has, but I think that's definitely the big one, is once he hit the direct-to-video market, suddenly that 1 movie a year that he was doing, it suddenly became 6 movies a year, and the quality as a result just kept suffering.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point, because, when you talk about the Star Wars films, I mean, I think I probably, maybe I speak for both of us, right? That in the 90s, if somebody had said, we're going to make a movie that's kind of like a Han Solo origin story, you'd be like, this is great. I love the idea of a Han Solo origin story. That's good. I got to see that movie. But I never saw Solo when it came out, and I heard it flopped in the box office. It didn't do anything of what Disney was hoping it would do. And it's because there's just, there were too many Star Wars movies coming out at that time, and I think people thought the idea of Rogue One was great. And then by the time, you got another Star Wars movie, somebody had made a joke, and I don't want to cast aspersions on any Cleveland Browns fans out there, but the period where the Browns weren't winning, somebody had joked that there were more Star Wars movies that came out in that period of time than the Browns had wins. It was like a 2-year period or something like that. There were like 3 Star Wars movies and 1 Browns win. But, you're right. And I think it, right now, especially with the streaming market, what it is too, I think too with the Seagal films, there's a cynical aspect to it where you're like, okay, there's how many of these movies come out, and it's like, this one wasn't directed by Keone Waxman, but a lot of the ones I think that Benjamin Sachs did, he would have Keone Waxman as the director, who kind of got what Seagal's limitations were. Like, and when I say Seagal's limitations, I don't mean like what Seagal is capable of doing. I mean what Seagal's willing to do, right? I think that's what we kind of think about, is like he's only willing to do so much in a movie. And Waxman would be able to work around it and get people like really hungry supporting actors like Byron Mann, Bren Foster, actors like that could work alongside of Seagal and do a lot of the heavy lifting. One that I think of, Fred Olen Ray did that Sniper Special Ops with Tim Abel, who carried that movie, while Seagal, we joke that's like a sit-down role. Can you hear me, John?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, same connection error here, but it looks like I'm disconnected from video. Okay, we're not using video anyway, so all right. But yeah, for me, I think that's another thing with Seagal, is that on top of the fact that there's a saturation, there's that cynical part too, where I think if you're a fan, you're just like, how many of these movies can I watch where Seagal, first off, Seagal can't lose, right? He gets the girl, but it's always like some kind of awkward thing where he gets the girl, where it's like there's some sort of weird romance thing. And then there's always some other person who's doing the heavy lifting who doesn't get all the glory. It's Seagal who gets it. And people see that paradigm, it's one thing to see that paradigm once a year, right? And you're kind of just like, oh, here's another Seagal film. I'm going to have fun with this. It's another when it's 3 movies and you're after you see the first one on streaming, you're like, do I want to watch another one? It's like there's sort of that second part of it. Like there's the fatigue, but then also that cynicism of like what Seagal's doing in these movies.
Well, I mean, and I'm looking right now at his filmography. And, okay, so when he hit the direct-to-video market, I mean, if you look at 2006 alone, he had 4 movies come out, okay?
Right.
So he had Black Dawn, Mercenary for Justice, Shadow Man, Attack Force, and then at the beginning of 2007, he did Flight of Fury. And granted, in all these films, I think, I've only seen one of these films, but I'd be willing to bet that in about a good half of them, he plays some kind of CIA spook operative of some kind of, of some form, who kicks ass and who never takes a punch. And I think that's one of the issues with Seagal as well. I mean, if you take a look at Jean-Claude Van Damme, for that matter, granted, while he did go into the world of direct-to-video around the early 2000s and even now, while he was still playing the tough guy, he was at least trying new forms of tough guys or new variations of tough guys. I mean, Until Death, he played like a dirty cop, and then Wake of Death, he played like a mafia enforcer. You know what I mean? So he was at least kind of varying up and changing his image. And not to plug my own show, but I remember speaking with Steve Latshaw, who is a screenwriter who writes quite a few of these films, and he said that as well. I mean, if you look at guys like Jeff Speakman and Brian Bosworth and Michael Dudikoff, they were the same kind of thing. They're competing against themselves, and if they're going to keep playing the same role and the same character over and over again, well, then suddenly the fans are going to turn on you, and the fans aren't going to want to show up for the next movie. And that's, to be perfectly honest, Matt, that's exactly what happened to me. I mean, I can only watch Hard to Kill so many times, or Marked for Death so many times. And then if I'm going to see a direct-to-video copycat of that film, where we are to ostensibly believe that this guy who is now 50 pounds heavier and 20 years older is still kicking ass at the same speed that he was earlier, and there's no growth, there's no evolution at all in the character, I'm sorry, in the end, I'm just going to go back. I'd rather watch Hard to Kill again for the 25th time. I'd rather watch Out for Justice again, because at least at that point, because I mean, if you look at Seagal from the early 90s or whatever, I mean, if you look at him in Out for Justice, you watch it and it's like, he is a bad mofo. Like, I watched that and I'm thinking, I could believe that guy, that scene where he goes in and he wraps the the pool table ball like in a towel, and he just whips everyone. And you watch it and it's like, okay, like I would buy that. And then you look at the stuff that he's doing nowadays, and it's just this big. And look, I don't want to disparage anyone who's overweight, but I mean, come on, it's this big heavy dude, wearing a giant leather coat, kicking a room full of kicking all the asses of like 10 guys. It's like, no, I don't buy it. Maybe he does still have those martial arts skills, but I'm sorry, I'm not there with you. I'm not buying it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and when you mentioned Dolph, you mentioned Van Damme. I just did a Gary Daniels film with Simon Miller of Explosive Action, and you think of those three, like, and I'm not, again, I'm same thing. I'm not going to cast aspersions on anybody for being overweight, but it is interesting that you think of those three where they're like really trying to show, not so much that they still have it, but there's a certain pride that they have as former athletes, where they want to, they're kind of still hitting the gym quite a bit, and they're trying to really show, I mean, I've seen like videos of Dolph's workouts recently where it's like he just, and Van Damme is the same way. And it's fascinating that Seagal's the opposite, right? Where it's like they he's making them Photoshop everything, and like, he goes to bed fully clothed in his movies. and all this stuff because he's like he's vain about it, but he's not really he's not going to do the work that those guys are going to do, where they have that pride where like they're just like, yeah, I'm going to keep working at it. But then also it's like these guys, you think maybe they're so vain, like they're trying to make themselves look still be in great shape and everything. But you notice that they do a lot of roles where their characters have aged, and this is a lot of these redemption kind of things where it's like, I think of The Bouncer with Van Damme, where he's an older person, he's in his 50s, he's playing someone in his 50s. I don't think Seagal can do that. He can't play that role of someone who's in his 60s, somebody who's vulnerable, someone who can be beat, who can lose, who is overcoming odds. He has to be this sort of omnipotent force that, like you said, I mean, Mark for Death, Out for, I mean, those movies, I think Mark for Death was on TV recently, and it's like, you watch that stuff and it's just electric. And it's almost like he's trading on that past and to keep making money, as opposed to, especially like a Van Damme, where he's not trading on that past. He's trying to build more. He's trying to continue to build on what was already there, as opposed to being like, hey, you liked me in Death Warrant, right? You're going to like me in this. He's like, no, I'm going to do something new. I'm going to add something to my CV, as opposed to just having the same thing, which I really appreciate. And, the part of the reason why Van Damme doesn't do a movie, as frequently as Seagal does, because he's trying to pick projects that he likes. And, there is some issue, Van Damme's movies tend to be longer, which I don't like. I still don't want to get over 90 minutes for a movie. So I appreciate that Seagal gives me a quick time period with his movies. But by the same token, it does feel like Van Damme is trying to explore more things or do more things where Seagal's just like, let me just, like you said, make Hard to Kill again or something like that.
Well, you said a lot of things there, actually, that I agree with and that are really interesting. I mean, if you take a look, for example, at Clint Eastwood, I mean, I think there's a variety of reasons why I think Clint Eastwood is still the powerhouse that he is today in terms of his movies. But I think one of the things that Eastwood has done, and he's made a conscious effort of doing this his entire career, is he chooses roles and he chooses characters that age with him. Okay, so if you look at Clint Eastwood and all the roles that he's played, I mean, he is now playing. I mean, look at Gran Torino and look at The Mule. I mean, not only are these great movies, but he is aligning himself and he is playing characters that are also 80-year-old men. And I think that is one of the things that has made both Eastwood and his films to where they can still stand up and they can still stand on their own two legs. With regard to Seagal, chances are it's probably very obvious that maybe a lot of these roles, the roles that come Clint Eastwood's way, are probably not coming Seagal's way. You know what I mean? And so he's obviously working with what he has. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you think, like, dude, if anything, play the mentor. Like, you can't keep going back to doing what you were doing. And with regard to March for Death and Out for Justice, I think one of the things why those films also still stand up and are the classics that they are is because if you look at the martial arts genre or just action films of that era, I think what Seagal brought to those films was a certain level of violence that we had not been seeing in action movies. I mean, if you look at those films, I mean, we had never really seen, at least to my knowledge, we had never really seen an action star breaking people's bones. You know what I mean? Like snapping bones in half and hearing the bones crack and everything. I mean, the level of violence in those films was almost on like kind of like a, I don't want to say a sadistic level, but it was on a level that I don't think we had seen. And so that's what I feel like, there's a wonderful book out there called Seagalogy that analyzes all of Seagal's films. And I think that's one of the things that makes him just such an enigma, the fact that he does have such classic films, and it's almost like he's become a parody of himself where, kind of like you said, a lot of these films, I watched one with him a few months back called Today You Die. And it's hilarious because there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where he is in bed with his lovely smoking wife, and she's asleep, and it's so awkwardly shot because he's in bed fully clothed, like you said too. I want to talk about that. That's just weird. All his movies, he's always fully clothed, and it's a weird scene because he's just sitting up in bed, wide awake, staring, while his wife is asleep. It's just, I mean, and it's little things like that. You know what I mean? It's just bizarre little character touches that he is doing in his films nowadays, you know, going to bed fully clothed. Or the one thing I wanted to bring up that I noticed is he's always wearing these big black leather coats in his movies. I mean, and almost these giant leather trench coats. Now, I'll be honest with you right now, Matt. I have never seen anyone in my life wear a leather trench coat. I've seen plenty of leather coats in my days. I might have even wanted to own one at one time, but I've never seen anyone wear a giant leather trench coat. And it's weird because he chooses, you know, that he's picking his wardrobe for himself. You know that there's not a wardrobe person on set saying, "Hey, Seagal, why don't you wear this?" You know that he's showing up and he's saying, "I am wearing this bizarre outfit here to hide this girth that I have accumulated over the past 20 years."
Yeah, and it's one of those things, right, where it's like you talked about, like he's in bed with his smoking hot wife, fully clothed, like we just said, the leather jacket. Like the only person I knew who had a leather trench coat was in college. My one of my roommates had a friend who would visit, and he was like this big guy with a leather trench coat. Not as overweight as Seagal was, but same idea, like just a big hulking figure. And so, yeah, that's the only person I could think of off the top of my head who had a leather trench coat as well. But I think that adds to the cynicism of it. There's sort of this thing where this guy is completely vain, who's doing these things that are just, I don't know. And then it's like you said, like I think, you know, one of those a year you can handle for the fun factor. But man, when you get, you know, however many of these that he's doing, like you said, it has that law of diminishing returns, I think, for the audience, where the thing, like you said, you know, this movie we're going to talk about here, the only reason why we're talking about it is because Seagal was in it. We probably wouldn't have, you know, we would have passed it on Tubi or Hoopla or whatever we would stream it on, Prime. We would pass it over if we don't see Seagal on the cover holding a sword. We don't think to watch it. And that's what gets us in the door. That's what gets us watching it. And so, you know, it's like there is that cynicism of like, you know, it'd be nice if maybe, you know, the people who did the movie got more play. But the reality is that if you just put the actual stars, the actual people that were in the movie a lot on the cover, we probably would have passed it over. And who knows? I mean, maybe that would be worth. I mean, I don't know. You know, we'll talk about the film itself as well and kind of get into it some, but. It's a fascinating thing. It's almost like they talk about with politics, and I'm not going to get political on this show, but it's like kind of a general political term. They talk about pulling candidates down ballot, right? So like the president or something, you know, there's the presidential election, and more people vote for that, and people like, you know, if they want to vote Republican or Democrat, they'll probably vote like the whole party on one ticket. So then like the state representative gets votes that they wouldn't normally have gotten because the top of the ballot's kind of pulling them down ballot, pulling them up from down ballot. It's kind of the same idea, I guess, right? That if Bruce Willis or Steven Seagal or whoever is barely in a movie, they're kind of giving the rest of the stars in the film more shine, or they're giving them views that they probably wouldn't get, I guess, in that sense. So maybe that's a positive, I guess. But I guess for fans that are coming into this wanting a certain Seagal and not getting it, there is a bit of there's frustration there for sure.
Well, he's got to be. I mean, you got to think at a certain point, he's got to be in on the joke, right? I mean, he has to know when he's on screen, like you said, going to bed fully clothed, wearing the equivalent of what is like a muumuu type shirt, or again these gigantic, you know, leather coats that cinch around the waist and everything. He has to be in on the joke and realize that the way he is appearing on screen is not very flattering, nor does it look cool and badass. You know, I mean, it kind of reminds me. I mean, this is a lame joke. Normally, I don't like it when people quote other comedians, but Christian Finnegan, who's a great comedian. He made a joke one time about the overweight fat guy at the swimming pool or at the beach or whatever, who is in the pool wearing a T-shirt. Okay,
Right.
like he's fooling anybody. Like no one's gonna be able to tell that I'm fat because I'm wearing my T-shirt. And I feel like Seagal is doing the same thing, when he chooses these ridiculous wardrobes. The other thing that you mentioned that I think is important to note as well, again, that kind of adds to the mysticism and the overall eccentricity that is his personality, is the fact that, you'll see videos on Instagram, YouTube, okay, of Jean-Claude Van Damme at the gym pumping iron, okay, staying in shape. Same thing with my boy Dolph. Okay, you'll see these videos of him. Arnold does that. Stallone has posted a ton of videos of him rolling like these giant tires and everything like that when he was getting in shape for the last Rambo movie. But what's so odd about Seagal is no, you don't see those videos. I think I've seen a couple recent videos with him within the past 10 years where he's doing some kind of like light Aikido demonstration or something like that. But it's nothing. Yeah, but it's nothing really where he's in the gym. But what is what is so bizarre about it is when you do see interviews with Seagal, he'll spend his time talking shit about the other action guys. You know what I mean? Like he'll spend. I mean, there's a notorious video out there where the interview is saying like, "Tell us about some other tough guys," and he is just being so rude, saying Michael J. White, no, he's not a tough guy. Dolph Lundgren, no, he's not a tough guy. I think when they ask him about Van Damme, he even says, "Can I laugh in your face?" Like it's kind of like. So I gotta wonder. I guess I know I'm kind of rambling here. I'm sorry, but I gotta wonder if he is in on the joke, and if he at a certain point is going along with it, and he's, you know what I mean? Like he's kind of building up his attitude to kind of help sell the fact that he is such a weirdo, I guess,
Yeah, I mean it's as good a theory as any, for sure. I mean the Michael J. White one, I've heard that he doesn't like Michael J. White for whatever reason. And you hear like Van Damme and Michael J. White, they get along really well. They and I think Scott Adkins, he gets along well with, so it's not like Michael J. White is out there starting fights with everybody, or same with Van Damme. It's like, it seems like Van Damme, gets along. I mean, he seems to get along well with Alan Moussi, I think is his name, from the Kickboxer movies. And of course, Dolph and Van Damme have worked together multiple times in addition to doing the Universal Soldier film. I mean, they did Blackwater together. And of course, I think Adkins talks about Van Damme as being a mentor type figure for him to help him out. And so it's kind of weird in that sense too. I mean, I guess there are some people that he gets along with. It seems like Byron Mann is someone that works with Seagal multiple times, which I love Byron Mann. I love him in a lot of stuff. So it might just be, there's certain people that he just gets along with, and maybe they know, maybe someone like Byron Mann or Bren Foster or something like that, they just kind of know like what Seagal is going to do. And so it's just like, you got to deal with it. You just kind of do what you're going to do in that movie with him. And, you're happy enough to get a role, or whatever. But the whole, I agree with that. And the thing too about Seagal that I've heard out there, the big knock on him from like MMA guys, guys that really have fought competitively, is that Seagal didn't fight competitively. That's sort of the big knock on him. And that's something that you can't say about Dolph or Van Damme. They both, and Michael J. White, they fought in competitive karate tournaments, Chuck Norris as well. But that's what I've heard is kind of the big knock on Seagal. And that's what, like, the MMA guys talk about. Yeah, they would just, I think Bas Rutten said, it wouldn't even be a contest if he fought Seagal. Which of course now it's like Seagal's, he's pushing 70 at this point, so you never know. But that might be part of it too, is that maybe Seagal, because he didn't fight competitively, maybe he feels a certain inadequacy that he's got to overcompensate for by, talking shit about some of these other guys that are out there trying to, I mean, maybe the thing with Van Damme, maybe he feels jealous because Van Damme and him came in around at the same time, and Van Damme's like, 10 years younger than him, and maybe he felt like he felt threatened by Van Damme's success, but then they had at the same time. You never know. I mean, with someone like Seagal, it does seem like there's a lot of insecurities there for someone who has given us so many really great films. You'd think he wouldn't have that, but it seems like he does.
Well, I've said it before. I was talking about this with a buddy a few weeks ago, actually. I think out there is a really cool script that is, if it's not already written, I think it could be written. But I think there's a really cool script that could be out there regarding Steven Seagal's early days when he when he was the first white man to open and run an Aikido dojo in Japan. And I think that is a really cool story right there, and I think that could make for a really compelling movie. Just the dichotomy of that entire situation and kind of what he faced, his story. The problem with that is, again, knowing Seagal, you know that he would not sign off on something like that unless he got to play himself. And it's kind of like, I don't think that's going to happen. But I mean, yeah, I think I think there was a time where he was legitimately respected in the field, and maybe he still is now, by a lot of the hardcore martial artists. But again, I think his early days. I mean, I'm not going to go into a lot of the rumors. There's some rumors that he helped train the CIA, and
Right.
I don't know about that, but I know it has been proven. His background, his early days, opening that school in Japan, and I think that could be a really cool story. But again, knowing him, that he's not going to sign off on that. I think he's, again, I still laugh at the image. I think Seagal, the big, what is he, like 6'4", 6'5"? He's at the point now where he's knocking on producers' doors and saying, "Look, I need to renovate my bathroom here. So what script do you have for me?" So.
Right. Well, because before we hop into the movie here, going back to his IMDb bio, he has rumored or kind of upcoming project Above the Law 2. So he is pushing this. I think he's also seeing the law of diminishing returns happening with his stuff, and he's seeing that maybe he saw the success Van Damme had with going back and doing the Kickboxer sequels, that he sees like, okay, I need to maybe trade on some of these old franchises because my name isn't enough anymore now. People want more than just my name on the tin. They want something that's like, and I mean, that Above the Law movie that came out recently, or not Above the Law, Beyond the Law. I'm getting Above the Law, Beyond the Law. Yeah, Beyond the Law has, I know, it's like these titles. It's almost like there's like a Seagal machine. I think people have joked about that you just, put in his movie titles and just kind of spit out a new title for a new movie of his.
There's Out for Justice, Out for a Kill, Out of
right,
Reach.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And Beyond the Law, if you look at the cover, it's got DMX on it. And I think, that was his last successful theatrical film, was the one that he did with DMX. And I think people were trying, that cover was meant to trade on that it was, let's see if we can get Exit Wounds 2, I guess, is what people wanted them to think it was. They wanted us to think it was going to be Exit Wounds 2. And that was his last big screen hit that he had. And then ever since then, I think he did one more. I think he did Half Past Dead in the theater, and it didn't do well. And he's been DTV ever since. I think he's trying to sort of trade more on that past in a way that he hasn't been doing previously. Previously, it was like, the titles were similar, but the idea was just like, this is just supposed to be Seagal. That's what you're getting is more Seagal. Now it's like, no, I want people to think these are actual sequels to these other movies that I did in the past. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out with him.
Well, I think with regard to this particular film, Against the Dark, I mean, like I said earlier, I kind of had an analogy with this one, and there's really no reason for Seagal to be in this movie. They do give his character a cool name. His name is what, Tao or whatever.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's really no reason for him to be in the film. You could take the character out. You could take his scenes out. You're still going to have a relatively coherent film, because while he is on the cover and he is top billed and everything, like I said earlier, I think he was on set for maybe only a couple days. He's clearly the one who is the least invested in the entire film. And I was thinking about it. What's interesting about his inclusion and his involvement is it's kind of like, okay, let's say, Matt, you're throwing a party Okay, you're throwing like a huge like gathering. Okay, and you have the entire menu catered. Okay, you're a chef, Matt. I don't know if you're a chef or not, but
Right.
we'll just pretend that you are. And so you have the entire thing catered. You have all these recipes planned. You have, everything good to go. Okay, you have a theme that is going and everything. I mean, the checks are being written and everything. And then suddenly, a day before the entire event, you have suddenly one of the financiers who's cutting one of your checks comes to you and says, "Hey Matt, I want you to include pineapple in everything here. Okay, we have a great deal on pineapple. I want you to include pineapple." Well, then suddenly you're like kind of going back. Well, wait a minute, like the recipe and like the food, like pineapple's not included. Like why would I include that all of a sudden? I'm going to have to redo things or whatever. And they basically tell you, if you still want this soiree to happen and everything, you need to include the pineapple because we have a great deal on it and it's going to go bad by the end of the week. So here you go. And I feel like in this particular scenario, and I can't prove this, but I have a sneaking suspicion, I think the financiers and everything, Seagal was the pineapple. They found this script and they said, we can work Seagal in this thing. We need you to include him, to where you had the writer and everyone on set thinking, okay, how do we work around this now all of a sudden? We got to make this a Seagal movie. And, I think that's one of the reasons why it becomes the mess that it is.
Yeah, because it's an interesting movie, right, in the sense that it is your standard, like, I don't know if I want to say Die Hard is the right way, but it's your standard kind of like horror, like film where it's like we have a group of characters who are stuck in an abandoned building that need to somehow escape from these, in this case, in this film, they are people who are infected with a virus that makes them vampire-ish. Is that the best way to think of it? Like demon-ish? I'm not sure what the best way to think of it is.
Yeah, they never call them vampires. They never
Right.
say that they're vampires or anything. So you can assume, but they're like a mix between vampires and zombies, I guess, right? I mean, you could take out the whole vampire element and make them zombies, and the movie's still going to play exactly the same.
Yeah, and so what they've done, like you said, they've grafted in this idea of Seagal being this hunter who leads a group of hunters to clear out these demon people from places that they're in. And so our characters are sort of trapped in this building, trying to escape, trying to get to a special door that they know will be open. At the same time that Seagal and his people are kind of clearing the area out. It's really fascinating because it's like, really what it is it's just your standard people trying to get out and escape the demons movie with these occasional moments of Seagal wielding a sword and killing the demons in another part of the building.
Yeah, it's wild because every time he's on screen, okay, and again, I would be shocked if he was on set for more than just a couple days. But the only time we see him on screen, I mean, he will float out of this picture for 15 minutes on end to where almost you forget that he's even in the movie. But to be perfectly honest, I almost lost track and I almost forgot that he was in it because anytime you see him, it's always the same thing. He is just walking down some corridor. I mean, because the film takes place in this hospital or whatever,
Right.
this abandoned hospital. And, I mean, anytime you see Seagal, it's the same beat repeated over and over. It's just, him walking down this hallway of the hospital, okay, leading a group of people. He's really not speaking that much. I think they dubbed most of his lines as well, okay. Him walking down the hallway, some vampires pop out. He pulls out his sword, he slices them, and he keeps walking. And what's wild about it is we don't even really know exactly where he's walking to, like what the destination really is. I mean, it's just him walking. And so I can't help but wonder if those few days he was on set, they pretty much just had two different hallways that they maybe decorated a little bit differently to fake the viewer into thinking that the film had more scale than it does. And it's pretty much him. They said, okay, Seagal, we need you looking tough here. Walk down this hallway here. Okay. And then they said, okay, I want you to walk down this hallway here. Thank you very much. And I'm almost convinced of it, Matt. I think they took that footage and they just edited it. They edited it and they recycled it and they pretty much spliced it again throughout the film, because there are various shots, like there are close-up shots of Seagal's face in some scenes where you can tell, like, coherently or whatever, narratively, it doesn't belong. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like they just kind of did, the editor just, you know, had a fun little cut and paste job or whatever, and spliced his what few footage scenes they had of him throughout the film. It's kind of like what Ed Wood did in Plan 9 from Outer Space with the Bela Lugosi footage, right? They took that and they kind of worked it to make it, you know, blend in with the narrative when it really shouldn't be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's you know, one of the things I think you'd mentioned when we did the final inquiry episode on your podcast was you talked about these like turnkey sets where it's like, you know, in that case it was like kind of like a turnkey biblical set or something like that, or turnkey westerns, right, where you just go out to a ranch and everything's all there. This felt like it had the same vibe, right? That it was a sort of a turnkey horror film set. That it's like some abandoned hospital that's been done up for whatever movie. It looks like they just kind of went in and used all of it the way it was. Give everybody some black leather outfits, and you're good to go. And so, yeah, you wonder the overhead. I mean, you know, Keith David and Lyndon Ashby are in this as Keith David's the military guy who's like your cliche, I'm going to blow up the whole thing guy. And then Lyndon Ashby is your, I guess he's not a military guy, he's a State Department guy, but he's the guy with a heart who's like, no, they're in there. You know, we got to let them get out before we blow the whole thing up. And they're nowhere near the action that's happening in this film. They could be in another movie as well. That's what's so fascinating about this. But you almost get that sense, right, that it's like almost like a turnkey film. Like the script, probably people looked at the script and thought, okay, yeah, we can do this pretty quick. You know, we've got, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's a, you know, I mean, I don't know what with the makeup people, maybe that's where the most of the budget comes in. But even that, it seems like there wasn't anything crazy about them. They didn't have fangs or anything. They just sort of had like blood on their mouth, and they had kind of like sunken in eyes. That was the extent of that. Yeah. Excuse me. But yeah, I think there's a lot here where, like, so it's almost like you're using your analogy about you've got to put pineapple in all the meals, but it's almost too like you're like, okay, well, I'm thinking like, man, I've got to put pineapple in everything. I don't want to do it, but wait a second, I've got the whole place already rented out for a really good deal, and I've got everything else on the cheap here. Why not just do it? You know, let's just do it. And
yeah,
you know, it's like so.
And there are some people, Matt. There are some people who like pineapple on pizza. And to those people, I ask, what in the hell is wrong with you? But, you know, that there is a market for it. And, yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. You know, when it comes to these direct-to-video low-budget Westerns, these, you know, direct-to-video religious films or whatever, you know, you sit back and you think, wow, you know, the costume designers and the set people, they really went to work. And it's like, well, you know, maybe they did a little bit, sure, but yeah, no, I think, you know, in the case of Westerns, I think, you know, the reason why we see so many of those is because they're relatively cheap to produce. You rent a ranch, and what's included with the ranch is like a whole wardrobe set of costumes that were used on a production maybe a week prior. And I think it's the same way with this particular film. I mean, because if you look at the direct-to-video genre, post-apocalyptic movies are huge. Right. And if you think about it, well, you know, why are they so big? Well, because they're cheap to make. Because if you think about it, with a post-apocalyptic movie, you don't really need much in terms of sets. And what set you do have, you know, it's okay for it to be run down and dilapidated and, you know, half-built because it is the post-apocalypse, right? You know, same thing with the costumes and whatnot. I mean, and there's been a lot of directors who have made their career out of doing, you know, out of working out of this particular genre. I mean, if you take a look at Albert Pyun, you know, a good handful of his movies are all within the post-apocalyptic genre. And you know what? The other thing too that we have to look at, and you know, almost really just kind of realize, is the fact that the market today is different than how it was 20 years ago. You know, 20 years ago, how it worked, and this came actually from Ben Sachs when I spoke to him, is, okay, you'd make a movie, and the idea is to obviously get the budget back, but make money on it, actually have
Yeah.
like a profit generated out of it in the end. Nowadays, it's flipped and it's different. Okay. The idea nowadays is to just get the budget back. That's it.
Yeah.
If you can at least get your money back, then it's a success. Okay. And so it's kind of, again, I was talking about this with a buddy. It's the gambling equivalent of, okay, Matt, you and I go to Vegas and we go to a roulette table and we each throw down $10 on the roulette table. Okay. And if we get our $10 back, we walk away from the table and we go home happy. And I feel like that is the equivalent with these films. Now, granted, I think if they make more than that, then obviously they're not going to be splitting hairs. They're going to be happy with it. But I think it's the exact equivalent. These producers, they sell the film, they get the rights to it and everything like that. They generate foreign sales and everything. They get their budget back. And then if they can make an extra, $2-3 on the back end, then they're even happier.
Well, that you make a really great point about that, because there's a director, Jay Horton, who I've reviewed a couple of his films. He's an indie director, and he does a lot of documentaries now because the overhead on those, of course, is really low, right? He already owns the equipment, so it makes it even easier. But he was talking about the difference when you put a movie on Amazon Prime, the difference between having it being streaming or having it be rental for streaming. And he said that, like, when you initially put a movie out, right, you want it to be streaming. You want to have it available to stream because a lot of people are going to watch it, so you get, however much money per stream. I think it's like 1 million minutes that it's like a lot. You have to get a lot of streaming to make any kind of money. But after a while, when the buzz dies down, it's better to just have people rent it, because you're barely getting any streams at that point because the movie's been out for a little while. So why not just have somebody pay $4 and you end up making a little bit more by doing it that way? Well, now I think about with a film like this, or from some of these films, like this one's available on Tubi. Well, if you're kind of in that mindset of, well, we made the budget back, a company like Tubi that's offering however much money per stream, that's probably a great model that Tubi has. They collect a whole bunch of these movies that have been out for a long time, where the company has made the budget back, and they're like, whatever I make is fine with me. So Tubi probably doesn't, they probably have a really good deal with these companies. I never really thought of it like that before, but it makes sense because a lot of Seagal movies are on Tubi.
Yeah, a lot of Seagal movies, a lot of Dolph movies are on there. I mean, it's really interesting. It's a completely different market than what it was when you and I first started, really watching these films and really enjoying them, because nowadays they're just done on what seems like an assembly line. I mean, there is one particular company out there. I'll go off on a slight tangent, but it does have a point, so go with me. But there is one production company named EFO. Have you heard or seen any of the films from EFO?
I've heard of them, yeah.
So I think they're Emmett Furlow, I think is their name or whatever. But I have not seen one film of theirs that I liked, that I thought was good. I mean, all of their films just stink. I mean, and what's really unfortunate about them is they get really good stars. They get named stars in all of their films. But again, because these films are done on an assembly line, where pretty much, okay, it's kind of like the old Canon way. They kind of do it in the old Canon way of selling a film, where they sell it based on the actor, on the poster. Okay, they get the money, and then they quickly just spit it out, and it just doesn't look that good. I mean, they did Escape Plan 2 with Stallone. I mean, here you have a sequel to Escape Plan with Stallone and Dave Bautista, and it's a joke. It's a mess. It just looks so cheap. They did another one with Mel Gibson and Kate Bosworth called Force of Nature. Okay,
yeah.
Same kind of thing. Don't be fooled by the trailer. The trailer looks kind of cool, but then you watch the film and it just seems so cheap and so lazily made. And so, yeah, it's the way things are going now. But it's really unfortunate that that's the way it is. But then again, look, it's a business. And, if I was in the business, then I'd probably be working, the same way. But I would hope that, okay, if you have these named stars on set, then at least try. to make it look good. I mean, I would think they're at least trying to make it look good, right?
Yeah, I mean, this movie definitely felt like it had a lot of trying in it. I mean, I can definitely agree with that. But yeah, it's hard to, I think it's just, like you said, the whole thing was kind of sautéed in wrong sauce, and we kind of ended up with some issues there.
Yeah, well, and what's also what's also really odd about this particular film is this was the first time that we had really seen Seagal dip into a different genre, dip into like the horror genre. I mean, if you look at Seagal from the 90s, actually all the way up to the time he did this particular film, his films were all relatively, I don't want to use the term realistic, but they were all relatively grounded within the real world. Whereas opposed to, his action compatriots like, Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, they had all tried their hand at, they did a little bit of sci-fi, a couple times and everything like that. But that was always Seagal. It's always like his movies, he always seemed a little above that. You know what I mean? Like he wanted his films to be real as possible. And I'll never forget when I first saw the trailer for this film and I saw the concept of it and everything. And I'm thinking, okay, Seagal's fighting vampires, huh? Well, he really doesn't give a shit now, does he? Like it's very evident now that the fact that he is now dipping into this well that he would not have done 20 years prior. Now, I will say, a Steven Seagal film fighting vampires circa 1992, 93, when he was, doing his Under Siege thing, that could have looked pretty cool. And that might have, I think that could have been sold and kind of would have been a pretty cool concept. But then you just watch it now, this big giant dude walking hallways with a giant leather coat and a sword. I'm not, that's not exciting to me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Hey, this is Joe Biden. Listen, I know times are tough, and there's a lot of fear out there. But I also know America will come back strong if we've got the right leadership. We can get kids back in school, folks back to work, back to their lives safely if we do it together. So thanks for listening. I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message. I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
When it comes to criminal justice reform, history has not been on our side.
I feel as though the nation has become desensitized, but Black people have not.
As a father, I have to turn around and talk to my 12-year-old son about police interactions. It scares the hell out of me.
Joe and Kamala uniquely understand the plight of what we've been going through.
Those are the things I do trust them with to lead us to that future.
These are the candidates to push Congress and say, we can get there.
Paid for by Biden for president.
Yeah, I think the funny thing about Seagal, like you said, he's kind of like, they kind of do like what we talked about, like I with like Keone Waxman and them, where it's like they have people around him to kind of almost like add a level of coolness. Like he's got these like slick people in his team that all have like leather jackets as well. And there's that one guy who does a lot of the fighting. He's a stuntman. I can't remember his name now off the top of my head. I had it. But he's done stunt movies with like I think he's done stunt work for The Rock, and so it's almost like part of this thing too, where it's like we're supposed to forget that Seagal is in his 60s and that he's kind of bigger, and his scenes he's kind of just mostly like slashing at nothing, and we're sort of then they add in the blood and stuff later, but yet then we've got some of these other people in the team that are doing more of the heavy lifting for us.
Right. And I think, it was really cool seeing Dwayne Johnson's stunt double, who I think is also his cousin, actually, seeing him pop up, in the film. Yet, I mean, he gets the most, that's what's really, if I was him, I think I'd be a little bummed. I mean, he gets some of the best action sequences in the film, yet he's not really on the cover. He's really not even in the short 30-second trailer for the film. It's, again, the Seagal's getting all the glory. I mean, it's to throw out kind of another lame analogy at you, but I guess it's the equivalent of you doing a project in school, right? And one person comes in and slaps his name on it, even though he didn't do a damn thing, and that's the one who's getting all the cred and all the acclaim and everything like that, right?
Right. Well, yeah, it's like this idea, right, that like nobody's going to take the project seriously unless you get the I don't know who it would be, like the prom king, or like the star of the football team or something. Like, the teachers won't take it seriously if you don't have the star of the football team doing the project with you. So it's like, you do all the work, slap the captain of the football team's name on it, and the teacher's like, oh, everybody gets an A because we love the football team, or something like that. That's kind of what you're doing here with this. And it is one of those things where you're like, like, I think when you had Benjamin Sachs on your show, and he was talking about sort of these unsung heroes that make these movies work, and I think he was talking about a lot of the sort of how much they have to do, right? Where it's like, Seagal's on set for 8 hours doing his stuff, which I don't know if that sounds long for Seagal, but the people making the scenes happen are there for however many hours before and however many hours after. And so, even with a turnkey set like we were looking at here, the amount of work that goes into the lighting and getting everything the way they want it, just for Seagal to lumber in, like you said, and slash his sword a few times and then yell cut, it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, going along with what you just said about having the football player come along and attach his name to the project, I completely agree. The only difference is this is the football player who graduated 5-6 years ago and is still coming to the parties and everything like that, and is clearly out of shape and hasn't thrown a ball in a while. You know what I mean? So as a result, it's kind of losing a little bit of credibility there. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think the thing for this movie that, of course, is selling us all, right, is this idea that it's Seagal and vampires. And it's something that we're expecting to be, Seagal and vampires. And the fact that
right there is a new concept. I mean,
right.
That right there, not to interrupt you, sorry, but I think that right there is something that you could theoretically sell the movie on, because that is something that we have not seen before. We've seen him play government agents. We've seen him play, retired CIA operatives. I mean, we've even seen him play doctors and authors, which is really kind of weird. But you know what I mean? But him, duking out with some vampires, I think that's something that you sell it on. You know what I mean? Right. And unfortunately, if your lead really isn't there, and he's, if he's not there physically and he's just not there, he's not invested in it, then what do you do? You know what I mean?
Right. And I mean, and I think that's where this movie, it runs into that issue, because it is pretty paint by numbers outside of the Seagal aspect, right? Where it's just, the two people that are hiding out in the hospital meet up with this other small group that are trying to get away from these things. So they all decide to go together, but then they split up. And then, all of these scenes of like, oh, we're in the bathroom, somebody gets dragged underneath the stall or whatever. Just that's sort of that impending danger everywhere, right? And then they add, of course, these macabre elements of like, intestines being eaten, things like that, which, again, even that kind of stuff, like just like the random, like, demons eating intestines, who knows if that's footage from another film, or, it's just, here we've got these rubber intestines around here. We'll just, put some corn syrup on them and have people chew at them a little bit, and then, gussy up the scene with some in post and make it look a little bit nicer. I think they probably use the same shots over and over again in the film of the intestine eating or whatever kind of stuff like that they had. But it's like they kind of intersperse that into little bits here. But it's pretty much the movie, and we've seen this movie however many times before. And only now, like you said, it's like we've eaten this dish however many times before, but now we're going to try it with pineapple and see how it goes that way.
Exactly. I was worried that analogy really wasn't going to land and click, but I'm glad that you appreciate it, Matt. So.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of metaphors and analogies. My blog, I'm just like I use them all the time. So yeah, a good one like that, I think it makes sense here, right? I mean, again, this is a movie. It's a movie that we've, I think you like you said, you made a really great point that, Seagal fighting vampires, you could really sell that and it would be a really great movie. Unfortunately, that's not really what we have here. What we have is your standard, abandoned hospital or whatever space, people trying to get out of there, fight off these demon people, however many scenes of them getting separated and getting attacked and all that, while Seagal and his crew in leather coats and swords are kind of fighting some baddies here or there. It's not even like a real, it's just like you said, like you can go like 15 or 20 minutes without any Seagal in the film. So, we lose him for big periods. We don't know how many people he actually shot scenes with in the film, because he does a lot of scenes where it's just him, or it's just him walking with these people kind of down. We don't know, like you said, we don't even know if it's the same corridor, if it's the same place each time.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised if they shot him walking down this hallway, and then they used that same scene, but they kind of reverse angled it or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah, and that's really what's unfortunate too is, I mean, not to plug my own show, but I recently recorded an episode where we looked at Universal Soldier Regeneration, which I think is one of the best direct-to-video films ever made. And I think one of the many things within that film that works is, okay, John Hyams, here he is, he's saddled with doing this film, but his leads, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren, are both on set for a limited amount of time. I think Dolph was only on set for about 4 or 5 days, and then Van Damme was on set for maybe 14, 15 days, if that even. Okay, so you're John Hyams trying to do his action movie, okay, and, it's being sold and marketed on being the next Van Damme-Lundgren pairing. Okay, well, what do? Okay, and where a lot of these films, like a lot of the films that Bruce Willis is doing nowadays, for example, okay, he's on set for only a few days, and the poster and everything is selling it as being a new Bruce Willis film, but when they have him on set, what are they doing? Well, he's just talking on a phone the whole time, or he's, sitting at a desk giving orders, or in the case of Seagal, we see him walking down a hallway. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry, but the fans don't want that. And what John Hyams did, which I thought, in my opinion, was brilliant, is he said, okay, look, I only have these guys for a short amount of time. Well, I'm going to put them to work, and I am going to save them for the third act of the film, and I'm going to really put them in the action, okay? And I think that's what they should have done here with Seagal. I mean, if they only have him for X amount of days or whatever, instead of having him walking down hallways and, limply pull out a sword and, you know what I mean? I mean, so lazy. If anything, save him for the final act. And I think that's kind of what I would have liked to have done. That would have been kind of cool if we see him, he finally shows up at the end. I mean, wouldn't that have been like the ultimate Deus Ex Machina? Okay, you have this group of survivors figuring out what they're going to do, and then suddenly Tao comes in with his guys, and they wreak all sorts of havoc, save the day, and you know what I mean? And they save the group and then go on to the next adventure. I almost would have rather had that rather than the 10, 12 minutes the Seagal's on film. What is it, maybe 8 of those minutes, it's just him walking down hallways. Like,
right.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene where they're trying to escape, which this scene where they're trying to escape made no sense to me. I couldn't quite figure out where, and maybe it was because I wasn't paying enough attention, but they're taking an elevator, and the elevator stops. And so this guy in the group who's like one of the people escaping, not one of Seagal's group, he like goes down a hatch, and he's like in this water area where I guess he turns the elevator back on. I don't know exactly what he does, but somehow he's supposed to be under them, but yet the elevator keeps moving not through the water. It just kind of keeps moving along the elevator. None of it made sense. But the thing is Seagal's not doing any of this stuff. He's just standing there in the elevator, and at one point he aims the shotgun outside to shoot one of the vampire people in the water area. But he doesn't he doesn't do any of the heavy lifting anymore. He's just, he's going to walk around, he's going to whip out his sword every few times, whack a few things, and then go back to kind of mean mugging it, and that's about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, obviously the check cleared for Seagal on this film, but I almost feel like, I mean, it feels as if the equivalent of, look, he got his check, he made sure that it was going to cash, it did, and then he said, okay, you get me for this amount of days, and I am going to speak as little as possible. I mean, and Ben Sachs even admitted this when I spoke to him. And he'll come on set. They'll have, and this is the real unfortunate thing. He'll come on set, okay, and they'll have everything rigged and everything like that, and they'll be like, okay, Steve, we need you to, kick 6 guys' asses here, and then you go over here, and then he says, no, I'm only going to do 2 guys, and then I'm going to go back to my trailer. I'm only going to kick 2 of these guys' asses or whatever. Well, then suddenly they have to rework the script and rewrite things and change things up. And, it's just difficult. I mean, if he would just give a little bit more, then I think we would have a result that's interesting. That not only that's interesting, but that is fun to watch. You know what I mean? And it's just unfortunate that he comes in. And on one hand, I think what I keep going back to is, on one hand, there was a period, okay, where Seagal's movies were being made. Like if you take a look at Under Siege, I don't know what the exact budget was on that one, but films like that, there was one time where Seagal was starring in movies that were being made for between 30 to 50 million. Okay, and now suddenly he's starring in these films that are being made for 5 million and less. Okay, and so of course, like professional, of course, if you're working on something where there's not as many resources, well, maybe he's not going to be putting forth as much effort, than he was when he was doing something like Under Siege. But having said that, it's kind of like, dude, there's still a market out there. There is still a group of fans, a solid core group of fans who like you and want to see your films. Can you at least give, maybe not 100% effort, but can you at least give 80% effort? And, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think, I think that's his mindset, is like, I'm just going to go in here. And I think like that you talked about Benjamin Sachs. I mean, he gives some real gems. He talked about the fact that he needs cue cards to do his lines. And you notice that directors are, this film's a little different. It's a little unique in that again, he's kind of like, this ingredient like pineapple that gets added to everything else. But you think of some of the other ones that he did with that Benjamin Sachs produced that had people like Keone Waxman directing them, where it's like he's doing these parts where it's kind of all the same thing over and over again, but like there's these things that he just won't do, right? I mean, and then in terms of like he always has to have the cue card, so it seems like they have to shoot him a certain way, right? So that it doesn't look like he's reading cue cards when he's talking to somebody. He doesn't do his reverse shots. So I've noticed some directors now don't bother putting the other actor in the scene. So it's like they almost do like Yasujiro Ozu, right? Who would always just do the person's head in the screen. He never did the shoulder, over the shoulder reverse shot. It seems like a lot of directors are just like, that's what I'm going to do from now on with Seagal. Is that, so that way I don't have to worry about cutting in a stunt double or something to make that work. And it's kind of like, you watch the movie and you think like, why are we going through all this effort just to get Seagal in a film? Is it really that worth it? And I guess from the standpoint of the studios, it's like to be able to have his name on, his face on the tin, his face probably photoshopped onto another body as we've seen, but to have his face on the tin, apparently it is worth it to go through all that trouble. But, like you talked about with Ben Sachs, I mean, if people are going through that much trouble to have to, change the script or set up the shot again or something like that, you wonder. I mean, I'm sure he's probably wondered a few times in making the movie, like, is it worth it that I'm going through all this?
I think in the end, that poorly photoshopped, I mean, and that's something else that could be a podcast discussion in itself, or just the hilariously poorly edited photoshopped covers that are on all of these DVDs. But the sad truth is that crappy looking photoshopped DVD cover, okay, for this one, for example, that right there was the equivalent of you and I going to Vegas and getting our $5 back on the roulette table and then calling it a night. You know what I mean? And that's the sad truth. Even before the film is made, that right there gets the sales and gets the budget back. You know what I mean? And so I think in the end, when you with a lot of these guys, when they at least get the check back and they at least get their investment return made, then in the end, there's really not a whole lot of care and time that's really put forth in this thing. You know what I mean? And that's really unfortunate. I'd like to think, I guess, if there's one it's really weird saying like if there's a perk to the pandemic because that there haven't been many perks. But one thing that I was thinking about that actually was echoed on another podcast that I listened to is I think we could be seeing the return of the mid-budget film again. You know what I mean? Because for the past few years, all we've gotten are like the really small little indies, and then we've gotten the big, huge blockbuster movies that are made for, you know, $200 to $500 million or whatever it may be. Well, with the pandemic now, I think we may be seeing finally again the mid-budget film, the films being made for 40 to 50 million. And I think if we can bring those back and we see those again, then maybe the market will change, the landscape will change, and maybe don't cross your fingers or anything, but maybe we'll get to see an invested Seagal again.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to see it. I mean, you're talking about sort of those mid-budget films. I mean, I think even before the pandemic, one really bright side, if you can think of a bright side in a movie that was as dark as The Joker, but the Joker was made for 60 million and it pulled in like $1.5 billion worldwide, which for that return on investment, if you compare it to the Marvel movies that were, like I think in Infinity War was made for like $500 million and pulled in $4 billion. Well, $500 million to make $4 billion, I think is whatever that versus 60 million to make a 1.5. Well, you think about it, for 120 million you can make $3 billion, right? If you're making movies that successful, and so you were hoping that maybe, yeah, like you said, that kind of that mid-budget movie comes back. I mean, I think one of the things with we were talking about Disney earlier. One of the things that Disney's tried to do is one of the reasons why they want to make a Star Wars movie every year and a Marvel movie every year and a Pixar movie every year is they want to completely overwhelm the theater system so that your AMCs and your Cinemagics or whatever, that 60% of their screens are going to be taken up by Disney movies, so that if Universal or Warner Brothers or whoever it is, comes out with a DC movie like a Batman, it doesn't have a lot of screens that it can show it, so they can just overwhelm it. And so even if that Star Wars movie doesn't do as well as they wanted it to, the fact that it's taking up screens and means that the Justice League or whatever doesn't get the screens. Yeah, one of the things I think too, thinking about with the pandemic is that companies like AMC are dying, right? Because people just aren't going out to the theaters now. And you wonder if they're going to need more content. Like if the system that Disney has created where they're trying to sort of squeeze out the indie theaters and they just want these big companies like AMC to just have all screens of Disney movies, and maybe a Sony or a Universal here or there. It might be that now they're in trouble because, they've created this top-heavy system that nobody expected a pandemic like this to come in and crush it. But now, I mean, look at this summer. They couldn't release the Marvel movie they wanted to release. I don't know if they had a Star Wars movie in the can. I know they're doing The Mandalorian on the streaming site, but they had to push back a lot of the films that they wanted to do this year. And you wonder if like if you've got a $500 million movie that you made sitting on the shelf not doing anything, it's a lot worse than 30 or 40 million, and also 30 or 40 million if it doesn't make it to the theater. It's not the worst thing in the world either if it's making those monies off VOD or being a part of a package like HBO. Yeah, I think and I think that could be a space that a Steven Seagal could live in. You'd hope that he could, or a Van Damme or any of them, that they could live in a space where the movie's not expected to make $1.5 billion worldwide. It's just if they could just make a certain amount and get people to the theater again. I would love to see it. I would love to see the movie. I don't go to the movie theater ever. Even before the pandemic, I was only going when classics like the first Star Trek or Lawrence of Arabia were showing it like as a special thing at the theater. So I haven't seen anything big in a while. So it would be kind of cool. It would be kind of cool to see Seagal back on the big screen at some point.
I think you just helped me come up with what could be the next great Seagal movie, in that all of the studios like Warner Brothers and Sony and Paramount, Lionsgate, whatever, they all get together and they hire a badass assassin, enter Steven Seagal, to go in and take out the big, huge conglomerate that is creating a monopoly on everything. Like, how cool would that be? Seagal versus Disney, right there. I mean, that could sell itself. The question is are you going to get a Seagal who gives a damn and is willing to and is willing to maybe drop a few pounds, not wear a goofy, weird muumuu or leather coat thing, and will will scale back on the dubbing and the stunt doubling. I think right there is kind of a cool concept, and possibly maybe you and I, when we get finished here, can sit down and maybe start writing this bad boy.
Yeah, I mean, and we, if we're thinking about in terms of keeping the budget low, we could have it all set in one big skyscraper, right? Where just
there you go.
Yeah, so we're keeping the budget lower. That's it. So whoever's out there thinking about, am I going to how am I going to bankroll this thing? We've already thought of that too. So we've got your set that you've been using already. We're gonna have that out there. We're gonna make it happen. So.
You know what? I'll do you one better, Matt. I'll do you one better. Okay, this is even cheaper. Is it takes place in the basement of the skyscraper where everybody is hiding, because then right there you have limited sets that are half built, right? So.
Yes. Yeah, I think one of the things I remember with when you had Benjamin Sachs on was he talked about how like a studio or whoever would come to them with a script and say, how much can you make this movie for? And he'd give them a number and they'd say, okay, do it for this, or do it for like $2 million less or something like that. So if you're already thinking in terms of like how we can shave money off the budget, I think we can already sort of help, whoever's having to think of how we're going to do this for less money. We're already sort of helping you, shave that money off of it.
There you go. Yeah. So anyway, well, I'm going to start writing this out, because I think, it's funny because that right now there are a ton of scripts being written, and there are a ton of projects that are in development that are either about the pandemic or set during the pandemic. And I'm really interested to see what action moves there. I know that there's got to be one right now about a heist during the pandemic. I'd like to think that there's one that's got to be in develop regarding a heist set film, like during the COVID-19 pandemic. But yeah, there's going to be some other stuff that's going out there, and obviously there's going to be zombie ones and various mutant ones or whatever, which is kind of sad, is kind of unfortunate, but but yeah, there's a ton of stuff out there. I'm just hoping that it's maybe a little original, and that there's some effort being put into it, where the end goal is not just to get the money back, but to make a solid a solid good-looking flick.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things, because I know you've interviewed some directors who make some of these movies, and I think even Benjamin Sachs talking about working with directors for these films, where I think in his case he would talk about how like the director would start to want to do things that they shouldn't be doing, right? That are going to make them go over budget, and he would have to come in and say, no, we can't do this, and it's about finding the director who will just do that movie that way. I think it's sort of like there's sort of like the whole thing, right? Of like we have to get everybody involved. I think it's I'm trying to think how I want to say it. Like there's a cynicism, right, about the film industry now, but especially about the direct-to-video film industry, where it's like, let's kick this thing out there. And when you watch movies like this one here, I can't think of any off the top of my head, maybe, but it's probably not a good thing. But when you watch a lot of these movies, you'll see these inspired moments where like the director or the cinematographer tries to get something in there well, or an actor will try to do something beyond what's expected, or they might have a supporting role and they just want to hit that supporting role out of the park. I think that's the key, right? Is if we can maybe pivot to a point where we're celebrating that part of it more and less like, oh, we got Seagal in this thing for 20 minutes, and okay, you're telling me you can make this movie for $5 million? All right, try to make it for $4 million, and let's see what happens. And so then he's got, someone like Ben Sachs has got to start cutting corners, right? It's like he knows, I'm sure, I don't know, with Against the Dark, I'm not sure, what it was like making this film for him, but I have to think that he's like, I'd really like to do this in the movie, but we don't have the budget for it, so we got to make it look like this, and I'm sure they made it look a lot better than they could have. I'm sure that like they've got really creative to make this thing look as good as it looks. And so it's hard because you like you said, we want to call the movie what it is, right? We want to talk about the movie for what it is. But then, yeah, it's like, who knows? This thing could have maybe been a lot worse if the people that were working on it that did care didn't care as much, right?
Yeah. Well, I've as poor as the film may have turned out, and again, I want to stress, it's not due to the filmmakers, it's not due to the writers or to the set designers, costuming, anything like that. I think the worst thing about this film is, in fact, Seagal, which is so ironic considering he is the one that sold the film and that was marketed the film and is on the cover. But in the end, I mean, this was a fun conversation, especially for Halloween. I didn't even put that together, but you picked the perfect film for the month of Halloween, and I really appreciate you inviting me on and letting me get to chat about it with you.
Yeah, because we were talking about which Seagal movie to do, that was on Tubi, and I think when I just like the idea of I've reviewed this one before, but I thought it was a fun one to discuss, like Seagal and vampires, and so then we're doing Seagal and vampires. It's like, oh, we're doing it in October. It's actually kind of fits the theme. It's kind of like I don't think I ever intended for my blog to be exclusively about action. I think I meant it to be about direct-to-video everything, but it just seems like action seems to be the space where a lot of fans are just very passionate about. I think direct-to-video action fans are ones who really enjoy the movies, even if they have flaws or if it doesn't come out right. So it seems fitting that it would be a Seagal action movie that's sort of horror-ish as well, that we'd be covering here for the October period.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I would much rather discuss this one than Sniper Special Ops, which I have not seen and I don't intend to. I saw a couple clips. I think I sent you a YouTube thing where they were talking about it, and I'm good. So I think the lowest I'll go is this particular film. So thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, the difference between this movie and Sniper Special Ops is that we were joking about how many scenes there were of Seagal walking down a corridor. There aren't even that many scenes of him walking in Sniper Special Ops. He's sitting for most of the film. That actually, Simon of Explosive Action was on the last podcast. When he reviewed it for his site, Explosive Action, he actually documented the amount of time that Seagal spent sitting versus standing up for his scenes. So it's like nice. Yeah. So we got a Seagal that was a little bit more invested in this, and the fact that he is standing for this film. He's walking in this film as opposed to just sitting as he was in Sniper Special Ops. So maybe we should be happy for getting a Seagal that was more invested than we were in talking about how uninvested he was.
Well, and I mean, I think we should also be happy the fact that we've talked about it, but we haven't fully identified it. But there's a great Halloween costume right there. We just need to get a bizarre wig. I mean, because we haven't talked about that either, but that's clearly a wig that Mr. Seagal is wearing in these films. But a bizarre wig and a giant leather coat that I'm assuming has to be special ordered, and then boom, you have your Tao Halloween costume.
Right. You also need the Chia Pet goatee, right? That he has sort of like kind of just, I don't know. It's like just kind of like around his mouth, right? It's kind of like actually this film he didn't have it, did he? Did he? No,
he didn't have it. He started the. It's weird. A buddy of mine, we call it the goatee and tiny glasses look. But if you look at all of his films within the past 6 years, he's rocking this goatee and these little tinted glasses. So I can't help but wonder if I don't know if he's deluded. I don't know if he is if he believes his own, I don't want to say they're lies, but if he believes that he is legitimately, some martial arts god, or if I'd like to think, I'm going to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. I'd like to think that he is in on the joke, and he knows that he looks silly, and he just figures, hey, I'm gonna run with it. It's the equivalent of, again, it's the kid who gets tripped in the halls, falls down, and then when everybody's laughing at him, he turns around and he just starts laughing as well. You know what I mean? Like, you can either laugh with them or not at all. And I'd like to think that's what he's doing.
Yeah, it's hard to say with that goatee. I mean, so Seagal is, I mean, he's like literally like, I think he's like 3 months old. I was going to say he's like 3 months older than my dad, who's born in 52 as well. But actually, since I've been doing the blog, I started in 07 with the blog. Initially, Seagal was born in 1951 when I started the blog. He's since changed that to 1952. And who knows, maybe in a few years, it'll go down to 1953. We'll see. You know, he just kind of keeps like, you know, eventually he just keeps getting younger and younger over time. But it's an interesting thing that like I don't know. Yeah, like we talked about earlier, he's never really pivoted on the age thing. He's just, you know, his movies, like the women just keep getting younger, kind of like the Matthew McConaughey and Dazed and Confused kind of thing. And he like you said, he's got the hair, the goatee now. He plays these parts that are people that are supposed to be, and that probably, I mean, maybe our age. I don't know. I mean, am I pushing it by saying that it's, you know, it's people in their you know, late 30s, early 40s? Is that who he's trying to play still with these movies? And it just is. We see it, we get it, we see what's happening, even with the amount of work that production does to make it not look that way. We can kind of tell what's happening.
Yeah, no. I would like to think that he would pull a Jean-Claude Van Damme, you know, Kickboxer. What was the Kickboxer reboot, Steve? Kickboxer Vengeance, Kickboxer Retaliation, where he played a mentor. You know, Stallone, he's now playing the mentors thanks to the Creed movies. It would be nice if Seagal was seeking out something that kind of, you know, allowed that. I mean, I think, you know, I told my idea about what I think would be a great Seagal script, but, you know, there's something else. I mean, how cool would it be if, you know, go with me on this one, but, you know, some kid who needs to be trained in the ways of Aikido and needs like an old mentor or something like that. I think, you know, something like that could work, but again, Seagal's ego is insisting that he plays the kid who is in training or something. You know what I mean?
Well, he can't be trained though, right? He has to always be an expert, so he can't be being trained.
Actually, he's already the expert. You're right.
It's right. I mean, because you think you could make a really good Karate Kid reboot, which, I mean, we keep doing Karate Kid reboots, and now with the Cobra Kai series, I don't know that there's a place for that, but maybe like a kind of an unofficial Karate Kid reboot. I mean, you could do it for direct to video where he's training someone, and you know, maybe he has like one scene where like the evil sensei at the, you know, the you know, Martin Cove character gets beaten up by him. You know, he kind of just throws that guy around a little bit, and we get to have some fun there. But overall, he's teaching a kid how to you know, defend himself, and you know, maybe too, like he's teaching the kid to defend himself, not to like go out and beat people up, but just to be able to kind of block things. And you know, it could be there could be a movie there for Seagal, but I don't think he wants to do it. Yeah, I think he's found what he wants to do, and he's going to keep just kind of, you know, he's going to keep tapping that well until it's completely dry.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, in the end, I had a ton of fun chatting it with you. So again, thanks again for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to, we spoke about it, but I'm looking forward to having you on for my Expendables episode when I get to that. That's still a ways down the line, but we'll be in contact between now and then anyway.
Yeah, I'm really excited to do that show. Now, speaking of your podcast, tell where can people find you? Where can they find the podcast and your site?
Yeah, so the podcast obviously is on all the major podcasting apps, iTunes, Stitcher. There's a lot of podcasting apps that I didn't even know existed, but we're on there as well, like Castbox. I didn't even know that was one, but yeah, we're on all those, iTunes, all those, SoundCloud as well, and then the official webpage for the show, which is pretty much just a running archive of all the episodes, but it also has a little contact tab and all that, is imustbreakthispodcast.wordpress.com. So if you want to hear me expound on more of these direct-to-video action films, mainly just the ones starring the great thespian that is Dolph Lundgren, then please check it out.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I love, like I talked about, one of the things I love about your podcast is that you talk movies, like I was on to talk movies, but then, you have people who are in the business talking on them. And I think, just you're talking to Benjamin Sachs, but also talking to some of the directors, that it's enhanced our conversation that we had about this Seagal movie that, it's kind of lackluster as a film, but we had a lot of material to talk about it because, some of the information that you've gleaned from your podcast, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, we spent, I think we spent the amount of time you and I chatted, we talked longer than the running time of the movie itself. So just now.
Right. So we kind of went past that. We got more material than the movie had for material.
Yeah.
So thank you again, Sean, for coming on. This was a really great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to be on yours to do that Expendables one. But for people out there, I know I subscribe on iTunes, but any major podcasting site, you should be checking out I Must Break This podcast because it's a really good one.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, everyone, listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
When it comes to criminal justice reform, history has not been on our side.
I feel as though the nation has become desensitized, but Black people have not.
As a father, I have to turn around and talk to my 12-year-old son about police interactions. It scares the hell out of me.
Joe and Kamala uniquely understand the plight of what we've been going through.
Those are the things I do trust them with to lead us to that future.
These are the candidates to push Congress and say, we can get there.
Paid for by Biden for president.
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino this year.
I was only playing for fun, so winning this was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's #1 social casino experience. It's serious fun. With over 80 casino-style games to choose from, you too could win life-changing amounts of cash. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and give them a whirl. That's ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void or prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of a winner.